Hello and welcome to the Pots and Trowels podcast with me, Jill and Sean.
Hello.
Hi.
We, just for those that are new to us, we are a podcast that goes out every week. It's all about gardening. We love gardening. We have guests that we speak to. We answer your questions so you can send them and we'll give you an answer. We do jobs for the week. Jill shares her recipes. And we also do gardening videos every week, Pots and Trowels gardening videos. So whether you want to listen to us or watch us, there's something every week on Pots and Trowels.
And our interview this week is with a gentleman who's just fitted so much into his life. You'd think he was 120 with the amount of things that he'd done. But you have a lovely chat to Alan Down, don't you?
Absolutely.
And we need to say thank you to our sponsors, Plant Grow, who create a wonderful range of sustainably created, composts and liquid feeds and mulches, and great stuff it is for the garden too.
We've got loads of questions coming up and some jobs for the week, which you're going to give us loads of things to do in the garden as normal, and including a problem with a pear tree. Something's been nibbling, we think. We've got to identify what's nibbling this pear tree.
Yeah, there's a conversation about the Chelsea plant of the year, and also Martin's got some lawn care tips. All of that's coming up, but we need to go and meet Alan, don't we?
Alan, thank you very much for joining us today to have a chat on the podcast. I know you're a busy man, and always conscious that you're out in the garden an awful lot, so we do appreciate it. You've worked in horticulture, I think, all your working life. So, shall we start by just finding out a little bit how you got into it and some of the things that you've done, because you've done a lot of exciting things.
Yes. So I actually started in farming. My family been farming for generations on both sides of the family. But I have 4 brothers, and it was a fairly small farm. There was no way that 5 of us could earn a living from the farm. And I went to a boarding school that taught agriculture, but it also had a horticulture department. And I was very interested in that. But I guess my interest sparked in plants in particular by wildflowers. I always had a passion for wildflowers when I was young. I used to collect them and press them and had a big collection. And indeed, my parents told me that when I was 4 going on 5, I was lost on the farm, and they panicked. Well, probably quite rightly. They thought, where on earth was I? And so they started searching the fields and got the other farms and the farm labourers to come and search as well. And I was found as happy as Larry in the middle of a 13-acre field, which was full of wildflowers, just sat there picking flowers.
Wow, what a wonderful experience. Yeah.
So I think that is really where I got started. And then I, realising that, there wasn't a future in farming, and I didn't fancy being round the backside of a cow every day, because it was a dairy farm. I explored openings into horticulture and started in the glasshouse industry to start with, growing all year round cut and pot chrysanthemums, and then had some experience with tomatoes and lettuce production in the winter, and then bedding plants and pot plants. So very much the glasshouse industry to start with. And I'm of the age when the oil prices came in and really decimated the UK glasshouse industry. So I realised a change was necessary. But at that stage, I was doing day release and then went on to Cannington College in Somerset, and was on the commercial horticulture course there. So my background has always been commercial horticulture rather than amenity horticulture. And that went well. And I realised that that this was something I was probably reasonably good at. So I went on to Pershore College of Horticulture in Evesham in Worcestershire. I actually applied to Hillier Nurseries to go into the hardy nursery stock industry, and was offered a post, and so was Felicity, my wife. She was offered a post. We didn't know each other at the time, and we both decided we would go abroad and get more experience.
Right.
So I went to Schleswig-Holstein in Germany, just north of Hamburg, which is a fantastic concentration of hardy nursery stock production, probably the most concentrated outside of Boskop in the world at the time. And Felicity went to North America and Chicago, not in horticulture. And in Germany, I worked in container-grown trees and shrubs, mostly shrubs, and root-balled conifers and shrubs. So I decided that I would leave Germany somewhat reluctantly and come back to the UK and indeed go to Hampshire and help them to set up their container production enterprise.
And
when I joined, they had mid-70s.
Right, so that's when nurseries were going over more to container-grown stock than all bare root, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's when garden centres were starting too, and hence the demand for container-grown plants and being able to sell plants all year round. So yes, there was a lot happening at the time. Notcutt's nursery were getting into container production, Blakedown nurseries, Bransford nurseries, and we worked fairly closely together and swapped ideas with them. Indeed, I tried to organize group buying because we were growing in poly bags in those days.
Yes,
not hard containers. So when I joined Hillier, they had a couple of sand beds, capillary sand beds, about 100 feet long, 20 feet wide, that sort of thing. When I left, there was 25 acres of container plants.
Wow.
After 9 years. And of course, being Hillier, it was an incredibly diverse range of plants. I mean, I think the time the catalogue we were supplying roughly listing 9,000 species and varieties.
Wow.
And then of course all the sizes within those, all the alternatives. I had the great opportunity to work with under Sir Harold Hillier. He wasn't knighted then, but Harold Hillier, one of the finest, most knowledgeable plantsmen of my lifetime, and with Roy Lancaster. How good does that get?
Exactly. And they used to produce, I don't know whether they still do, the Hillier's manual, didn't they? Because I know when I was a student, I was a student in nursery practices at Merryst Wood in sort of 80 onwards. And that was the go-to Bible for trees and shrubs, the Hillier's manual. Yeah. I've still got a tatty old copy back in the office that I occasionally, it's probably out. A lot of them will still be in existence, but there's an awful lot of new varieties come along since. But yes, that was the book to go to.
Yes, well, it is still in production. I think 9th edition, which is now published by the Royal Horticultural Society with Hillier, and Roy Lancaster still involved, or was involved with the last one. So yeah, it's still, I think, the go-to reference, that and Bean. But primarily, I think Hillier's. So I was with them for 9 years and was the assistant to Brian Humphrey, I mentioned earlier, the production director. So I looked after those plants that weren't grown in the ground, and then John Woodhead, I shared an office with, looked after all the field grown stock, which was very substantial too. Where the other thing I did was I was there growing a very wide range of trees and shrubs from seed. So lots of species and also volumes for amenity planting. Because Hillier were into so many markets at the time, we would send plants to botanic gardens all over the world. You would have a mail order catalogue with lots of private customers. There was the amenity market, which might be to landscapers, but the bulk were going to local authorities and new towns. Have I missed anything? No, I think that probably covers it.
Well, you've done quite a lot. There's an awful lot there.
Then the garden centres, of course.
Yes.
So for a while, we were growing plants to supply to Woolworths and then Marks and Spencers. They were all
Wow.
dabbling and getting into container marketing.
So the nursery industry at the time would have been huge, wouldn't it? I suppose a lot more was probably being grown in the UK than maybe nowadays, and less imports. Do you think?
Oh yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
without a doubt.
yeah.
But the volumes are much greater now. But
Mm.
yes, lots of nurseries have amalgamated. Been acquired by bigger companies. Lots of the small specialist ones have disappeared, sadly. Um, yeah. So that was an interesting period. And you say, well, why wasn't I still there? Why did I leave? Well, I had a Nuffield farming scholarship. Do you know about those,
Yes, I
Martin?
do. Yes, because
Yeah,
I'm involved with the Great Yorkshire Show, and they're involved with
brilliant.
that as well. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I applied for a Nuffield scholarship to go abroad and study and gain more experience. So I was successful and went to North America looking at container plant production and marketing. Quite a big subject, but so I visited, well, on that trip over 20 states, and a great variety of businesses, and learned a lot. Wrote a thick report, brought that back, and that was distributed throughout the industry. I gave lots of talks
Hmm.
to share my knowledge in the industry, because that's one of the things you do as a Nuffield scholar.
Yeah.
Um, and But it opened my eyes to the fact that there were lots of Americans who knew only a little bit about growing plants, and were making a really good job of it, or
Hmm.
a success of it. And I thought, well, I'm sure I can do that too. And so Felicity, I'd met and married at Hilliers. Then she is a florist, and she was working. Hilliers had a florist shop, and she was in the florist shop. So we decided to start a business, to go out and find one. And eventually we found a very, very rundown nursery and garden centre, garden centre, a retail nursery near Bristol, which the best thing about it was its location, and that's so
Hmm.
important that you can't change that. So it required a lot of work to get it back on its feet, but it was at a time when garden centres were doubling turnover year on year, because those early years were fantastic, and we did the same. Fortunately, we sunk all our savings into it, and it went well,
Good. Yeah.
and we never looked back. So we had it for 35 years. Um, and It was a good location. Bristol's a big city, a lot of surrounding dormitory towns, which we had many of our customers from. And in later years, around about year 2000, we bought a small holding on the opposite side of this busy main road,
Hmm.
uh, and started back into growing our own plants. And
Wow.
we grew a very high percentage of the plants we sold, mostly hardy plants. Well, in fact, exclusively hardy plants. But we grew a very big range of it,
Mm.
and that made the difference. I mean, we were always about very plant orientated,
Hmm.
but then we could say, these were grown by us, and
Yeah.
consumers
Absolutely. Sounds
really valued that.
fascinating.
Really
Yeah,
valued that.
absolutely. So,
Yeah.
well, you're supposed to be retired, so you tell me, but I know you're a very, very busy man. So maybe what we can do, we just take a short break, and then when we
Yeah.
come back, we can find out what you're doing in your retirement, and a little bit about your garden now, which I know you open to the public as well for the NGS.
Well, coming up, we've got a question about olive trees based upon you did an olive tree video recently, and I think it was a couple of weeks ago. But
Hmm.
Alan, he's had quite a life, hasn't he?
Oh, amazing. Just his list of things that he's done, the places he's been to. I mean, he's had such an exciting, varied life, hasn't he?
Yeah. And what amazed me was, I mean, he worked for Hilliers, which is a huge nursery, one of the big names in horticulture, at a time when they were doing that transition for everything being grown, field grown. So you'd plant it in the ground, grow it for a year or two, dig it up and sell it, to going over to container growing, which is what we all get now. We're all used to it, aren't we? We wouldn't, apart from roses and maybe fruit trees, everything else we expect to be in a pot.
Yeah.
So it was quite pioneering, in the 70s doing that, because they were starting from scratch with composts and growing techniques, and so yeah, it would have been interesting, really interesting.
But you wonder now, because I think Alan was saying that where he was, there were 25 acres of pot grown shrubs, trees, container grown things. So, and that was in the 70s when it was only really just taking off. So you wonder now in some of these countries that grow all our container plants,
thousands
how
of
many
acres
would an average
rows
company have? You're just talking thousands, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, amazing.
It's big business. But yes, he's obviously done an awful lot through his life, so and
but
lots of experience.
His roots of loving wildflowers when he was a child, you remember?
He got in the meadow.
Yeah. Interestingly, he's going to tell us about it in the second part of the interview, but that love of wildflowers is still very much with him, so we'll hear a bit more about that.
We're going to find out
later
about
on.
his new garden.
Yeah.
Part 2.
Good stuff. Well, just a reminder that if you're watching or listening, you can drop us an email if you want and ask a question, or just put a comment on one of our videos and Martin will answer it, or Jill and I might answer it, but you might want to hear Martin's answer.
One day, one podcast with
one
Mike.
day.
Yeah.
So our email address, info@potsandtrowels.com. Go ahead, Martin, sorry.
I was going to say, if I'm indisposed one week and I haven't got time to do it, you two could just take over and do it.
We could talk about strawberries, because you're a bit of an expert on strawberries now.
I don't know about an expert. I'll tell you what, we've missed April the 1st, or we could all have swapped round roles, couldn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. We need to plan that for next year then, don't we?
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
I'll do the editing.
You do the cooking. I'll do the cooking.
Well, talking about strawberries, watch this, listen to this one then, Sean, see if you can do this one. Pauline, our friend Pauline from Breezy Point, over in the States, she's just listened, or watched rather, the video on planting strawberries that we did. I've just ordered some, and we'll do as you say. This year she's going to put some in baskets and the rest in a raised bed, which is more or less what we did, isn't it? But she's saying, what fertiliser do you use? And she said, is it 10-10-10?
Oh. So what do you think, Sean?
Well, I can't remember what the numbers stand for, but we have got a video on it. It's PTK or PK, it's something like that.
NPK.
We've got a video on that if you want to find out what those numbers mean. I think we need a lot of P. That's my feeling.
Well, you're almost there. You're thinking of potash, but
I am thinking of potash, but P's not potash.
Potash is actually the K part of it. Yes. Don't ask me why, but it is. But yes, Pauline, fertiliser. I mean, a 10-10-10, so it's nitrogen, phosphates, potash. So that's a balanced one, which will get them growing. It gets good green, good top, good root growth, and you've got the potash for flowers. So I would say that'd be fine. And then what you could potentially do is when they are starting to develop the fruit, if you've got the equivalent of what we would use in England as a tomato feed, a high potash tomato liquid feed, then just give them a few drinks of that, and that just gives them that little bit of extra boost of the potash. But a 10-10-10 will be fine. You probably planted them by now anyway, so but yeah, that if you have done that, it's fine.
Okay.
Fantastic. And while we're on the subject of fertiliser, feed and fertiliser, is seaweed, this is coming from Andy Farmer on YouTube, is seaweed a suitable feed for your houseplants?
Well, seaweed is a good general sort of feed come tonic, because it has some of the major nutrients, but it's also got all what we call the minor nutrients in there as well, the trace elements. So it is good generally in the garden to boost plants. Doesn't give them all the feed they need, because it hasn't got large amounts of nitrogen, potash or phosphate, but it's a good all-round tonic, and I use it often when I'm planting. It gets the roots going, and just to perk plants up if they're looking a bit sort of yellow, so it's good for that. The drawback is you can use it on any plant, so
I'm feeling a big but here.
There is a but. As you know, you can buy powdered seaweed, or I use the liquid seaweed, and you dilute it with water, but it has got a certain pong to it. It's a bit like being in the bottom of a fishing boat.
Okay.
So that's my only thought. In the garden, you don't notice it. Sometimes I go in the greenhouse when I've fed in the morning and think, "Ooh, that's a bit fishy."
A bit whiffy.
So I just think if you're doing it around the house, you might notice you've used it. It won't harm the plants at all, but it might just, cause a dispute in the house.
If it was a sort of spell of nice, lovely weather, we take our plants outside.
We do,
that would be a time you could do it then.
Yeah, I don't know how long it would smell, would stay in the compost, but experiment and let us know. If your house smells like a fishmonger's, then we'll report back to our listeners.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous. Well, look, we've got some more questions on YouTube, and I think there's another question or two on email, but there have just been some general comments on our YouTube, and I thought I'd just read them out. So here we go. A video from a few years ago, how to divide primulas. Somebody has said, Mrs. Honey has said, "Thank you, sir. I like the last comment about giving them a good drink. You can treat yourself to a good drink afterwards. Cheers."
Always do.
Cheers.
I feel like that's somebody who's watched some of our
coffee.
live shows. Sometimes our live shows have headed towards a drink at the end of them.
Yes, definitely.
Do you want to do an email question, Jill, or shall I carry on with some comments?
Sure. Yeah, no, Mal in Flaxton. Where's Flaxton?
There's a Flaxton in North Yorkshire, east of York.
Okay, well, Mal has got a bit of a problem, or had a bit of a problem last year, and I think just wants to take evasive action for this year. They've got an Espalier Conference pear tree, which had lots of blossom last year, started to develop into small fruits, but most of them seem to have been chopped off. And that's an inverted commas because he's not quite sure. Can you tell me what's caused this? He has sent some photos. They have got birds and squirrels and lots of insects. I'm not sure if they're causing the problem or is it something else, and what can Mal do to stop it this year?
We've seen some photographs, so that does help by sending the photograph. And it is, the blossom had fallen off. I mean, this is obviously last year, and the little pears, only less than an inch tall, were developing, but those tiny miniature pears, and they are literally half of it has been chomped off. So it's not an insect. I don't think it's a bird. It's not a disease or anything. The pears can get a thing called pear midge, where the fruits develop and turn black and fall off. But these aren't whole. These have literally looked like somebody's gone and just bitten the top off. I'm suspecting it might be your squirrel friends, or deer. I think they'd eat more than that, the deer. But maybe even sort of field mice or something going up the tree and having a nibble. But it is something nibbling them off, I think, rather than a bird pecking at them. So I think you've just got to keep an eye on them this year. Might be worth, if you can somehow drape a net. If it's against a fence or wall, drape a net over it, just temporarily, just to see if that protects them, and then you know that whatever it is can't get to them.
Spikes at the bottom of the pot or something like this, maybe chicken wire.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, my squirrels are not my friend. Go ahead.
I've got another email question. It's from Tina. And Tina says that they're in the process of cutting the lawn for the first time since the start of November last year. I'm thinking this might have been a slightly older email. This might have come in 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we've only just got to it.
We're very lax. I do apologise for the staff.
But was wondering, she's also sent some pictures about an area of the lawn where the washing line is. Obviously, that's getting quite a lot of traffic over the winter season while bits are being walked on, and there are some bare and patchy parts. What can she do to help the grass redevelop now that the grass is growing everywhere in the garden? Based in sunny Liverpool, technically the south-facing part of the garden, but it's situated between a tall hedge and the house, so it can be shaded.
And again, the photograph shows it, that where you've got the washing line, there is this track where the grass looks quite compacted as well, doesn't it? And it's a bit bare. I am going to be giving some tips on lawn care on the questions, which means you've got to now listen to the end of the podcast. But I will, basically, in your situation, I think what you need to do is probably relieve the compaction a little bit, because you're going to struggle to get grass to grow on that worn area. So you just get a fork and just stick the fork in just a couple of inches and wiggle it a bit and move it back and stick it in and wiggle it. That will get some air into it. It'll allow water to go down. And I think what I would do is to just to get a rake or the back of a fork, just scuff up the bare patches of soil a little bit, and then just sprinkle a little bit of grass seed on it, and water it if it stays dry, and then that will germinate and grow through. But you can't walk on it.
I knew you were going to say that. So
happening.
Tina's got to move a washing line.
Well, that would if you could move your washing line.
That's not ideal, though, is it? Because there's always that one place
I know,
that you want it to be.
But otherwise, you're never going to get the problem solved. So you need to get the grass back thick.
Sorry, Tina.
And then the other thing is mow it little and often once the grass is through. But the rest of the lawn, the more you mow a lawn, but not too short, but little and often, really builds up the strength of the grass, and it will take a lot more wear that way. So you can recover it, but it's going to take a few months to get it back in good condition.
I've seen some of these things you can put on lawns, like almost a mesh. Is it worth doing something like that in that area or something, or is that just sort of?
You could do, but normally to put the mesh down, you need a thick covering of grass to start with, and then you can buy it is like a literally a mesh that you just roll onto your lawn. So you mow the lawn, roll it out, peg it down, and then allow the grass to grow through it. And then when you start cutting the grass again, the mess disappears in the base of the lawn, and that is good. You can get quite strong ones that you can drive a car over, not that you're going to take the washing out with the car, but so that is another option. If you've got a path across a garden, put a mesh down and let the grass grow through it to give it that bit of base strength. So yeah, good tip there from Sean, our lawn expert.
Hardly.
You're an expert at filming lawns. And
I know a bit
lawnmowers,
about
though.
lawnmowers.
Yes.
I've learned. Look, we've had a few comments come through. I mentioned earlier about on the olive tree planting video that we did a couple of weeks ago. So I just thought I'd read a couple of those. So Beth Lynch has put, "I hope you did your warm-up exercises before starting this job." So there, obviously that's a link back to a podcast we did a couple of weeks ago as well.
I'm doing it as we speak now. Look, I'm keeping my hips stable and just twisting my body. So for those that aren't watching this on YouTube will wonder what I'm doing, but I'm just twisting my body side to side.
Margaret Kennedy says, "Thank you. I think I might plant mine in the border too, though it's much smaller than this one. Good tips." So that's quite nice to hear. Thank you, Margaret. And then Pauline, who we've already heard from actually via email, also made a comment. What low temperature can the olive tolerate? She'd love one here in Breezy Point, Long Island, but we do get some very cold winters. And she's also put, "I hope you stretched and warmed up before you started digging, or Jenny will be after you." Jenny featured on our podcast from a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, what temperatures can an olive tolerate?
Well, they are not hardy. I think you're safe to sort of... Well, ours has survived probably -10 since we've had it. When it was younger, we used to take it into the cold greenhouse in the winter. For the last 7, 8, 9 years, maybe, it's been outside in a pot. So it will have had, when we were in Yorkshire, and even down here, we've had -8s in the last couple of winters. So -8, -10, once it's established. In the ground, the roots are a bit more insulated, of course, so but you might get top damage. But I suspect where you are, because you're sort of... New York, aren't you? You get quite cold winters. So I would have a look round, Pauline. If you can't see any others growing in any other gardens, I think that's a bit of an indication.
I suppose, could you find maybe a sheltered spot and use fleece and all that sort of stuff?
You could do. If you've got a sheltered spot, sunny, well-drained soil, and keep the wind off it in the winter, and then in the very cold weather, wrap some fleece around the top. You could probably get away with it, but I can't say hand on heart for sure if it will survive with you, because I don't know how cold you get.
Fair enough. Look, that I think is all the questions I've got for now. I don't think we've got any more email ones, have we?
No,
Just
that's it.
Quick reminder then, if you want to get in touch, drop us an email, info@pots&trowels.com. And if you want to see any of the videos or the podcast episodes that we're talking about and we mentioned, you can go to pots&trowels.com, and there's links to all of them when I remember to update it.
Right, well, I think we need to go back and hear a bit more from Alan, and also how he got back to his love of wildflowers.
So, Alan, you've now retired from the nursery, Cleve Nursery, and you are still a very busy man. I know you are the past president of the HTA, which is the Horticultural Trades Association. So do you just want to tell us quickly what that entailed?
Yes, I was flabbergasted actually to be asked because I had retired, and the president, Boyd Douglas Davis, had done 3 years. Normally you do two, but because of COVID, he did 3 years, and the his deputy, who was due to take over from him, left the industry,
Right.
and that suddenly presented them with a problem. No one else on the board felt they had time to step up and do it. And Boyd and I have known each other for a long time. And he said, well, I think I know someone who might be available and prepared to do it and with the right experience. So he approached me to join the board. And I said, yeah, that would be great. I'm really chuffed to do that. And then a week later, he said, you join the board. Will you be our next president?
Wow. Straight into the
And I
hot
nearly
seat.
fell over.
Yeah.
So yes, I was president for 2 years, and 2 years meant I had to get up to speed very quickly because the HTA, the Horticultural Trade Association, is extremely active, particularly in political sphere. It's an association there to represent its members' interests, safeguard those, because we were dealing with Brexit, we're dealing with the peat issue, the move away from peat, but also trade barriers and import difficulties, which are still ongoing. But I think things are gradually getting better, but there's still lots of work to do.
Yeah.
So I treated it as a figurehead role. Boyd had been much more hands-on. So I went back to the way that some previous presidents have treated it. And I was able to do that because we engaged, we've been without a chief executive officer for some time, but we engaged Fran Barnes as our chief executive officer, and she hit the ground running and is superb, which takes the pressure off the president. And you can, as a president, be very much engaged or not. Boyd was very much engaged. I chose not to be so much. Will Armitage is the current one. He's very much engaged with it again. But what I was keen to do was to get out and about and meet members and learn about their businesses and learn firsthand what the issues were with their businesses, what the challenges were, and feed those back in. So it meant I traveled quite a lot around the country. That I think was helpful. But I also brought to the role experience of primary. I would call myself a nurseryman first and foremost, but also a retailer, perhaps an educator. I mentioned in the first half that I would come back to Cannington College. I was the governor at Cannington College for 8 or 9 years.
Right.
But then I chaired the corporation. The governors became a corporate body, so I chaired that for a couple of years, and then I had the opportunity, having been in regularly on local Radio Bristol, and before that independent radios, being gardening expert. We were offered the opportunity to have our own television program filmed in our garden at the back of our garden centre at Cleve near Bristol. And so we had a TV, Felicity and I had a TV series for 6 years. We filmed nearly 150 30-minute programs, and it was successful in that it was called Garden Calendar, but it was successful, I think, because it was very topical: what to do, how to do it, and why you do it. Just breaking it down to the simple stuff.
Yeah.
Not assuming that the reader or the viewer knew much about it at all. And we had a third person, Sue King, who came from news reading. She was a TV professional, and she liked to garden, but she knew very little about it. So she'd talk about putting that shovel in the dirt to plant something, and you know, so she used the sort of terminology and asked the question that everyone was too embarrassed to ask.
Yeah, which is good because
That's
that's what people want to know, that
brilliant.
basic
Yes, yes,
knowledge, don't they?
yes,
Yes, yeah. So no, that would be a great experience. What
yeah.
about your garden then? Because I know you and Felicity, obviously, as well as being professional horticulturists and nursery people, you are very keen gardeners. I see
Yeah.
lots of pictures of your garden on your X account and your Instagram, which we can put those on the show notes so people can follow you. But you also own the garden as well, don't you? I think you've got an opening coming up soon, haven't you?
We have June 14th, 15th for National Garden Scheme. I think I've got the right date. This village, the village is Tinton Hull, and we're in South Somerset near Yeovil. And Tinton Hull might ring bells with people's memories because National Trust property Tinton Hull Garden is here in our village. That's not us. We're at the other end of the village. And it is a lovely garden, Tintinol Garden. And ours, we when we came here in late 2018, December 2018, was really a blank sheet. There are a few trees that we've kept, but nothing really else of any merit. So it was perfect for us. We bought a little of extra land to increase the size of the plot, which is an acre. So we have Felicity trained also as a garden designer. So she laid the beds out and designed the planting. We have a small fruit orchard. We have I mean, it really is a mini orchard. We have a vegetable patch where we are almost self-sufficient, and a fruit cage, masses of fruit, 2 polytunnels, one of which I reclad last week in that wonderful spell of hot, still weather. You could not get better conditions for putting a polythene tunnel sheet on, and a glass house too. And then beyond that, we've devoted, I suppose, about a quarter of our garden purely to wildlife, but we do have some fruit trees in there. So ultimately, I hope it will become an orchard. We're desperately trying to get native plants in there. We are trying hard to get yellow rattle, that pseudo parasite. That's not quite the right term, is it? It's not a true parasite, but a parasitic plant, parasitic plant, isn't it? So it feeds on the roots of grass to make it weaker, which will enable the wildflowers to flourish. So I'm coming full circle, you see. I want my wildflowers again.
Yep, you started in that little
Yes.
wildflower meadow as a 5-year-old, and here you are now doing exactly the same. Yes.
Still wanting them. Yeah.
No, it sounds amazing. And as you say, it's opening in June. So anybody that's in the southwest of England, because I know we've got listeners that are crossing the state, so they probably won't be able to make it to it, I'm afraid, Alan. But anybody in the southwest, all the details will be on the NGS website, won't they? So they can come along and have a look. I wish we lived a bit nearer because I'd come myself.
Oh yes, you'd be very welcome anytime, Marty, if you're down in the southwest. It is the 14th and 15th, and the afternoons of the 14th and 15th. And as I say, there are 9 other gardens open in the village. And roses are particularly good in this area. We have a heavy-ish loam soil, which is great. Once things are planted and established, they grow really well. But getting them established can be quite tricky. And it has been desperately wet with water sitting on the surface of the soil. So we are playing catch up to get ready for this garden opening. We're madly mulching the borders at the moment with, we've got an anaerobic digester about 4 miles away. So we buy the digestate after it's produced the energy, and we're mulching the borders with that. We're on, I think, our 5th year using it now. We buy it in bulk, big trailer loads. And we've noticed the tremendous increase in the worm count, which is such good news, because the soil here wasn't very well drained before, and the worms will certainly help.
Right. Well, that's good to hear that, because our sponsor of the podcast is a company called Plant Grow, who supply mulch made from anaerobic digester. And I've been busy doing exactly the same to just get a bit of life back into our sort of dank clay soil. So obviously, we know it works.
There you go.
So,
and it works well for light sandy soils too. It gives it a body. And I know I'm a great advocate of it. I think it's tremendous.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for joining us, Alan. I hope the open day goes well, and I'll no doubt bump into you somewhere through the summer at one of the flower shows or something. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Martin.
Sounds like he and Felicity have created a lovely garden there, quite a large garden, and as he talked about, it's got the wildflower patch.
Yeah, no, lovely. But you were chatting to Alan earlier on in the day, weren't you, about something we can't quite say everything,
well, we can't, not really. It's embargo.
It's a bit of a secret.
We were both on a meeting for the selection of the Chelsea Plant of the Year. It's an annual competition held at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, and breeders of new plants send their plants to the RHS, and we were looking at everything that had been sent in and doing the shortlist, because obviously they can't all go through. So there was Alan, me, I think there was 6 or 7 of us all together, and it was a really interesting meeting. Saw some amazing new introductions, and the shortlist will then be at the Chelsea Flower Show, and one of them will be the Chelsea Plant of the Year.
And who wins that Plant of the Year? Who judges? Sorry, who decides?
That is judged by all the RHS expert group members. But we will see the plants in real rather than photographs.
I'm sure there'll be lots of television coverage of that part of Chelsea as well. So yes,
we'll bring details of that when it's all happened.
Yeah,
super. And we did a podcast episode about that a few weeks ago. So again, if you go to pots&trowels.com, you can have a listen to that podcast, and obviously watch it on YouTube if you prefer. We need to do some jobs, because this has been the longest epic Pots and Trowels podcast we've done in a long time. Get into these jobs. What should we be doing, Martin?
Well, just very quickly, we're going to be mulching as well, like Alan was in his garden. We've had some rain, we had a very dry spring, and I like to put the mulch on when we've had some rain, so that we've got the plant grow mulch going on. I say as we speak, but as soon as we finish this, Jill is going to be out with a wheelbarrow.
I'm going to do my stretches first.
Oh, yes,
Warm-ups.
I'll have another cup of coffee. Lawns, we've already touched on them with Tina, but it's a great time to be putting, if you haven't already, put a little bit of feed on your lawn, just a little bit of a spring summer fertiliser. Try and do it before rain, so that the rain dilutes it and washes it in and dissolves it. That will keep your lawn healthy through the summer. But the main thing I would say at this time of the year is mow little and often. It's lots of people, our son included, will mow his lawn and then leave it for 6 weeks, and it gets all long and tufty.
You're naming and shaming.
I am. I didn't name him. I will do on the next podcast. And I keep saying, if you mow it every week, it is easier to do, it's faster to do, but it keeps the grass nice and thick, and it wears much better when you're walking on it or playing football or whatever you do. So mow little and often. And the other thing we're doing is we're getting all the tomato plants and the peppers potted up in their final containers in the greenhouse, so that they can now grow on through the summer, and we'll get some delicious crops. If you haven't grown them from seed, of course, garden centres will be full of the plants, so get some soon and get them in your greenhouse.
Good stuff. Well, that is probably about all we have time for this week, so that's great to know. And remember, potsandtrowels.com if you want to links to any of the videos or podcast episodes. info@potsandtrowels.com is our email address if you've got a question. But yeah, I think that's about it.
It is, yeah. We'll be back again next week then.
We will.
See you then. Bye.
Bye. Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.